In this video, I want to discuss a method for making your novel a page-turner using an approach inspired by that famous Indian book of love, the Kama Sutra. Now, a lot of people think this is just a catalogue of exotic sexual positions, the sort that would give you a slit disc if you tried them, but there's much more to it than that. It contains some interesting advice on courtship and seduction that can be usefully applied to the art of seducing the reader. So welcome to another installment in my series on how to write your novel using that most unlikely of writing implements, a round Oxford bus ticket. For inspiration, I've taken bus number 2 downtown to peek through the bars at this place, Trinity College, Oxford. This is where, in 1840, the explorer and linguist Richard Francis Burton studied, and Burton was responsible for publishing the first translation in the West of the Kama Sutra, a book that so outraged Victorian propriety that he was forced to publish it privately. Much of it is about pleasure and the intensification of desire by various tricks, the principal one being playing hard to get, teasing, which is similar to the techniques we use in keeping readers turning pages. Novels are emotion delivery machines. But the difference here is, with a novel, we enhance the reading pleasure paradoxically by making the reader suffer. To show how it works, I've invented a novel inspired by a true story about a rail crash that occurred just north of Oxford railway station in 1853. Well, I've embellished the true story a bit. The story is about this man, Jack Barrett, who was a signal box man. Now, at the beginning of a courtship, the Kama Sutra advises a young man who is attracted to a lady to initially win her trust. And the way to do it, the Kama Sutra suggests, is to invite her to play a game of hide and seek. Similarly, we need to get the reader to take our hero Jack into their hearts so they become invested in his fate. And then we give them a hard time. Remember that paradoxically, when we are lost in a book, in what is known as the fictive dream, we enjoy suffering. So let's start by making the reader like Jack. Well, I'm going to use a technique familiar to anyone who's ever read a Dickens novel. I'm going to make him an underdog, a victim of social injustice. Jack is an orphan living in an orphanage overlooking the railway station, and he is fascinated by trains and also by the beautiful Bathsheba, a recent arrival at the orphanage. So Jack has a burning passion to become a railwayman when he leaves and to marry Bathsheba. But he stands very little chance of either because of his lowly position. He will have to defy great odds to achieve his dream. So instinctively we root for him. Now Jack studies hard, and because of his hard work and dedication, he wins a scholarship to join the railway company, and he lands a job as a signalman. And Bathsheba leaves too and gets a position as a maid in a great house. And Jack courts her on a day off, and he proposes. She accepts, and Jack is the happiest man alive. Well, we can't have that, can we? If everything is going well, the reader has no reason to hang around. We need to tease the reader. Now, in Chapter 4 of the Kama Sutra, the young lady is advised to stoke up the lover's ardour by playing hard to get. She should oppose him, it says. When he begs her, she should not yield herself up to him, but should resist. Well, that's the oldest trick in the book, isn't it? She torments him and drives him wild with passion. And in a novel we do a similar thing. We stoke up the reader's ardour by throwing numerous setbacks into the hero's path. We give the reader hell, we tease the reader, and we dial up the misery until it reaches a fever point, and then we throw in a bit of hope, just so we can then dash it and torment the reader further. So let's add some trouble. Jack has a rival at the railway company called Jim Falseheart, and he is sweet on Bathsheba too, and since she loves Jack, Jim Falseheart hates Jack. And now we'll have a disaster. Jack's negligence causes a terrible accident. Now the point about being a signal box man is this: if you make a mistake, it can be catastrophic. You think, okay, I've got the 4:15 Manchester Express on the up line, I got the slow train to Didcot on the down line, and I got the goods train, which I can put before the slow train, and then I've got another goods train on the up line, and you have to remember where everything is. And in a modern world, you'd have a computer screen, but the poor old signal box man had to keep it all in his head, and of course it's easy to forget. So for this reason they invented Rule 55, which stated that if a train was kept standing at a signal for more than 15 minutes, the fireman should climb down out from the cab and walk to the signal box and tell the signal box man, remind him that he was there. So on the fateful morning, Jack is in his signal box and a man appears at the door, and Jack says, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm the fireman from the goods train." And Jack cries, "You can't be. I just sent the goods train on 10 minutes ago." Oh no. Realization dawns. He's forgotten about it. And the problem is, it's now too late to prevent a head-on collision. No power on earth can stop it. All you can do is sit and wait. So Jack calls the railway station manager and calmly informs him that he's wrecked the 4:15 Manchester Express. And then he waits the longest 2 minutes of his life. So let's add some more misery here. What was the goods train carrying? Dynamite. Oh dear. There is a blinding flash, and then we hear the distant rumble of a huge explosion. Jack's life is over. So let's add more misery. Jack made this error because he'd been up all night nursing his dying mother. She died at dawn, and Jack walked exhausted to work and asked permission to be excused from his day's duty. And this was refused. Now we'll add some more misery. It was Jack's enemy Jim Falseheart who conveyed the message, and he lied. Jack should have been excused. So Jack is charged with manslaughter. But time for some more misery. A very powerful man, Lord Monte Cassino, lost his wife in the train crash, and he demands that Jack be severely punished. And Jack goes to trial, and the judge refuses to admit as evidence the story about his mother, and Jack is sentenced to 11 years hard labour. Well, now we can dial up the reader's suffering even more with another familiar trope, forcing the hero to make a dreadful act for noble reasons. Bathsheba visits Jack and tells him she'll wait for him forever. But Jack forbids it. His life is over, he says, and she must on no account sacrifice hers. He tells her he will receive any visits from her or any letters. And this is what happens. All her letters are returned unopened. Then Bathsheba discovers that she's pregnant with his child. And with Jack gone, nasty Jim Falseheart begins to woo Bathsheba. And she faces destitution, and so to save herself, she agrees to be his wife, and they marry. Now, as readers, we hate this, because we know it's Jack who should be with Bathsheba. And then Bathsheba gives birth. But then Jim discovers a letter she has written to her aunt in which she confides that the child is Jack's. So Jim throws her out onto the street. And she goes to the prison and pleads to be allowed to see Jack, and she is refused. She's reached the end of her tether. She decides to throw herself and a baby off the bridge. Now we'll add some hope. In the Kama Sutra, the girl is advised at this point to give her lover some hope by giving him a glimpse of her leg. And we'll have Lord Monte Cassino passing in his carriage. Okay, I know this is a bit of a coincidence, but it happened all the time in 19th century novels. Now he is appalled by what he sees. He takes Bathsheba and her child home and gives them warm food. And on the wall is a portrait of his wife, Alice, who died in a rail crash. And Bathsheba tells him her story, and he is overwhelmed with pity for the suffering he has caused, and he begs forgiveness and promises to have the injustice of Jack's imprisonment remedied, and he promises also to make an allowance available to them. Well, that night Bathsheba goes to bed, giddy with optimism. In the Kama Sutra, the lover now puts a betel nut in the girl's mouth and kisses her. Then he kneels at her feet, because, it says, however bashful or angry a woman, she can never disregard a man kneeling at her feet. Anyway, everything's going all right now, isn't it? There is hope. But as the footballers say, it's the hope that kills. The following day, Lord Monte Cassino presides at the opening of the new gasworks. There is an explosion, and that is the end of him. And as soon as his housekeeper learns of this, she throws Bathsheba and her child out onto the street. And all is lost. Or is it? Because just then, Ebenezer Squeers, Lord Monte Cassino's solicitor, arrives. It seems that prior to going to the gasworks, he visited Squeers and altered his will, making a generous bequest to Jack, and instructed Squeers to instigate an investigation into the crash. Or Jack is exonerated and released, Nasty Jim Fossart is arrested, and Jack and Bathsheba get married. And so, finally, after all the misery, we get the consummation of joy which we've been longing for, the happy ending. And at this point in the Kama Sutra, the chap takes his sweetheart to the bedchamber and shampoos her. I must admit I was puzzled by this initially. The people in the Kama Sutra seem to spend an awful lot of time shampooing each other. But then I looked in a dictionary and saw that shampoo is not an English word. It's originally a Sanskrit word, and it means... Or I'll tell you, it means massage. And if you want to learn more ways of making the reader moan, be sure to check out Gateway to Narnia, my free 10-part e-course on how to write your first novel. The link is in the description below this video.